All right. Okay, so it's Thursday the 2nd of March, and I wanted to welcome you all to our Metabolic Reset meeting. And my name's Rachel Stevens, and I'm going to be talking about the Metabolic Reset and how it works from a scientific point of view, and also from a basic step-by-step. And feel free to ask any questions as we go along. And so the Metabolic Reset actually is a very old scientific diet, and it's been around since the 1940s when Dr. Simeons, he actually was an endocrinologist, and he was spending his time investigating obesity and why did it occur. And on one of his trips out to India back then in the late 1940s, he actually had an epiphany. He was observing the Indian women who were heavily pregnant and were working in the fields, and he realized that they were working very hard, and they had their local diet, but yet they were still producing these really healthy babies. And he was wondering, they didn't have a lot of food either. So he went back to his clinic in Rome and started investigating that. What is it about pregnant women that they may not get a lot of food, but yet they can still produce, healthy sized babies? And so through the course of his investigations, he discovered that actually they're inside men and women, both of us, we have a peptide that we're all born with. It's not a hormone, but it's peptide like hormone. And it's called human chorionic gonadotropin. We all have levels of that. But when we're pregnant, it raises exponentially high because it has a purpose in the body. Now, we measure it when we're pregnant, and you can test it via your blood or your urine to say, yes, you're pregnant because it's got so high. But it has a purpose in the body. And what does it do? It actually protects the muscle and the structural fat of the mother from being cannibalized for energy to feed the baby. Now, the reason why we need to do that is there's 3 different kinds of fat in our body. There's structural fat, which actually serves a very important purpose. We have structural fat in our cheeks, underneath the layer of the skin. We also have it in around the organs when it serves its purpose of, protecting it and cushioning the organs during impact, and also on the balls of your feet. And that's why when anorexic women have, reduced really low body weight, they often can cannibalize that structural fat in the bottom of their feet, and that's why they have painful feet for the rest of their lives. So that's an interesting fact. So structural fat is incredibly important. Then we have obviously the circulating fat that actually from our food that we eat, that we use to break down into energy straight away at short notice. But then we have the 3rd kind of fat, which we don't want to have, which is abnormal fat cells. And that's an example of that is visceral fat, which is you can see on both men and women around the belly. Okay, and abnormal fat cells deposit all over the body. They deposit on the liver, and that's why doctors call it a fatty liver. It deposits around internally around the organs. You're going to have it in obvious places like hips, thighs, bottoms, jowls. Okay, so we recognise abnormal fat, the difference. Now, obviously when you crash diet, when you actually reduce your calories to a low amount, what's happening normally is the body will automatically go straight to structural fat, and it will go to muscle to start to break down in those reserves for energy, okay? And that's not what you want to do, because as you can see when you actually are dieting, what generally happens is people lose the fat off their face. Okay, they get thinner on the face, they get thinner on the neck, on the chest, on the breasts, and then it doesn't ever target the abnormal belly, the fat around the belly or the hips and thighs. And people start to get tired, they're obviously lacking lots of energy because they're not getting a lot of nutrients. And so what happens is the body then says, when you start increasing your calories again, you've actually gone into a starvation mode, and it then will take on every part of, you know, the food that you're taking in, and it'll then store it because it's gone into a starvation mode, and it's designed to actually store it so that never happens again. So what we're doing with the metabolic reset, which our clever endocrinologist, Dr. Simeon's realised, is that that particular hormone-like substance, when it was injected into the body, it actually had a protective mechanism. It prevented the muscle and the structural fat from being used for energy, and then it unlocked the abnormal fat cells. So it actually allowed the abnormal fat cells to be broken down for energy. Now, over the course, I mean, this, for years and years and years, only very wealthy people could afford to use this service because they were monitored by a doctor because it was using injectables. They were in a clinic and they were on a specific diet and were being well looked after. So that was obviously the rich and famous. But in 2003, a homeopathic version of this activator was invented, and it was so cheap, and that means anyone can use it without being observed by a doctor, because homeopathics are very, very safe. They work in the body, but they don't work the same way as an injectable does. So it is the exact same process. You're going to use an activator to protect your muscle and your structural fat during your low-calorie diet, and at the same time, with our Life Plus products, what we're doing is actually supporting the body through that process, because if you are actually cutting your healthy fats out, then your brain will actually be suffering from that, because we need good healthy fatty acids for the brain. Having just the fibre and the probiotics doing its function in the gut, and then having the multivitamins, then you know that your body is still getting the nutrients even though you're having a very low healthy calorie diet. The other thing is that proanthanols actually are fantastic because they stop the depletion of collagen. So when you have weight loss, a significant weight loss, what people find that their skin doesn't come in. You know, they actually will lose the weight, but then they'll have a lot of stretch marks. The skin will be saggy and dimpled. And, particularly overweight people would probably then have to have surgery, to alter that. But when you're taking a combination of really good nutrients, plus proanthanols, our super antioxidant, which stops the depletion of collagen in the body, and the MSM, which is the organic sulfur, then that combination actually works on the connective tissues to help bring them in at the same time, the skin and the weight, as the weight's leaving the body, or the fat cells. You're actually getting a real pull in of the skin. And, you'll be able to see the changes so that there won't be stretch marks or sagging or wrinkling. And that's really evident when you have a look at the photo. People who've done this before you, because they have a re-sculpturing. When you're doing a crash diet, you're going to see people are just losing it off the top, and it always seems to never get very far, does it? And they look like they don't have a lot of energy. But when you look at the photo evidence of people who've done this particular metabolic reset, it actually, you can see a really great resculpturing of the body, and the shape is actually changed in the right places. So you are going to see centimetre loss. It's in this particular reset, it's not a focus on necessarily weight loss. It's all about that's why centimetre measurements are really important, because people are going to notice that in their measurements, not necessarily so much on the scales, unless you have a very large amount of weight to lose. And one of the most important things is that you will be detoxing at this time, because heavy metals and toxins are found and stored in the abnormal fat cells. Okay, so it's very, very important to actually have, the minimal amount or no abnormal fat cells in the body at all times, because that's where you're storing, the things that we don't want. And the other thing that people don't know is the inflammatory markers are stored in abnormal fat cells as well. So inflammation is deadly to us. You know, people don't realize that any kind of inflammation in the body will actually cause complications, and you'll end up with cardiovascular disease and things like that. So you want to have no inflammatory markers. Autoimmune diseases, you'll always be able to find out if your autoimmune disease is started purely by measuring inflammatory markers. So you want to have no abnormal fat cells. Okay, so that's the science behind it.